Imagine your loved one is dying, and an ambulance is racing to save them, only to be stopped by a power-hungry HOA Karen demanding they follow the parking rules. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happened in this small town, and what happened next changed everything. Late on a quiet Tuesday evening in the peaceful neighborhood of Maplewood Hills, Mark Peterson frantically dialed 911. His wife, Sarah, lay unconscious on their living room floor, her face pale, her breath shallow. Mark's hands trembled as he pressed the phone to his ear. "Please," he begged the dispatcher. "She's not responding. Just hurry." The ambulance roared down the street just minutes later, sirens wailing, lights flashing, a beacon of hope racing toward the Peterson home. But as the EMTs tried to turn onto the Petersons' cul-de-sac, they were met with an unexpected and absurd obstacle. A woman in a floral dress standing in the middle of the road with her arms crossed. Janice Miller, the self-proclaimed queen of the Homeowners Association, had decided this was her moment of power. She marched up to the ambulance, waving a clipboard in one hand like it was a royal decree. "You can't park here," she snapped, pointing to the curb. "This is a fire lane." The paramedics exchanged bewildered glances. The driver leaned out. "Ma'am, we're responding to an emergency." Janice didn't budge. "And I'm enforcing the rules." Inside the house, Mark knelt beside Sarah, his heart pounding against his ribs. Where was the ambulance? He had heard the sirens. Why weren't they here yet? He ran to the window and saw the flashing lights down the street, blocked by none other than Janice. He sprinted outside, his desperation turning into rage. "Are you insane? My wife is dying." Janice turned to face him with a haughty smirk. "I understand your concern, Mr. Peterson, but the HOA has strict regulations about emergency vehicles parking on our streets. The rules exist for a reason." Mark's fists clenched. "The rule is to keep people safe. You're stopping them from doing their job." Janice scoffed, her manicured nails tapping against her clipboard. "The ambulance can park in a designated visitor's spot and walk to your house. Rules apply to everyone, even emergency responders." The EMTs had heard enough. "Screw this," one of them muttered, jumping out and grabbing the medical kit. They sprinted past Janice, ignoring her shrill protests about HOA violations. By the time they reached Sarah, valuable minutes had been wasted. When they finally got her to the hospital, the doctor's prognosis was grim. The delay had caused her condition to worsen significantly. It wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a life-threatening stall. Back in the neighborhood, the fallout began almost immediately. Word spread like wildfire. The neighbors were horrified. Many had tolerated Janice's reign of terror for years. Her endless fines, her ridiculous rule enforcement, her habit of patrolling the streets like a dictator in yoga pants. But this, blocking an ambulance, that was a new level of insanity. Mark, exhausted and overwhelmed with worry, returned home the next day to find a small crowd gathered outside his house. His neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a feisty retiree who had never been a fan of Janice, stood at the front. "Mark," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "we're with you. Enough is enough." Janice, however, saw the outrage as her own moment to shine. Instead of apologizing or admitting fault, she doubled down. She called an emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance of course, where she proceeded to gaslight the entire neighborhood. "I understand emotions are running high," she began, her voice dripping with condescension. "But we must remember that the HOA exists to maintain order. The rules are there for a reason. If we start making exceptions for ambulances, then what's next? Delivery trucks? Visitors parking wherever they please? Complete chaos." A hand shot up in the crowd. "Janice, someone almost died because of you." Janice smiled tightly. "And I deeply sympathize. However, it is important to recognize that rules must be upheld." Mark couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, his voice shaking with anger. "You delayed an ambulance. My wife could have died because of you. And instead of apologizing, you're trying to justify it." Janice pursed her lips. "Well, Mark, if you had read your HOA handbook, you would know that emergency vehicles should only enter the community through the designated access points, which I have been telling the city to mark properly. It's unfortunate, truly, but not my fault." The crowd erupted into furious whispers. This was it, the moment when Janice had finally gone too far. What she didn't know was that her reign was about to come to a crashing end. Because while she was busy lecturing her neighbors about parking codes, a mysterious informant had sent an anonymous letter to the mayor's office. And what was in that letter? proof that Janice had been embezzling HOA funds for years. The backlash was immediate. By the following morning, nearly every resident in Maplewood Hills had heard about what happened. Janice Miller had blocked an ambulance, and now Sarah Peterson was in critical condition. The community was outraged. It started with hushed conversations between neighbors at the mailbox, then exploded into a full-on revolt in the community's online HOA forum. Post after post flooded the message board. Speech balloon, she delayed an ambulance for rules? Are you kidding me? Speech balloon, she's been out of control for years. But this is beyond insane. Speech balloon, there's got to be a way to get rid of her. By noon, an emergency neighborhood meeting had been organized, this time without Janice. People gathered in driveways and on front porches, whispering, strategizing. The residents had had enough. Mark Peterson, still shaken from the previous night, was at the center of it all. Normally a quiet, mild-mannered man, he was furious. He didn't want sympathy, he wanted justice. "I don't care how much power she thinks she has," Mark said, his voice trembling with anger. "She's not going to get away with this." The residents agreed. It was time to take action. But Janice, she wasn't going down without a fight. That afternoon, she struck back hard. As if nothing had happened, she marched through the neighborhood in her signature pastel blazer, clipboard in hand, issuing new HOA violations to everyone who had dared to speak out against her. Skull trash bins visible from the street. Fine. Skull lawn decorations exceeding HOA-approved guidelines. Fine. Skull holiday lights still up? Double fine. The punishment wasn't just financial. Janice was targeting her enemies one by one, making their lives miserable. The Gables, an elderly couple who had openly called for Janice's resignation, suddenly found their application for a home renovation mysteriously denied. The Rivera family, who had hosted the anti-Janice meeting, they woke up to a letter stating their backyard fence was 1 inch too high and needed to be torn down. Even the neighborhood kids weren't safe. The Schmidt twins, whose parents had made a social media post about the ambulance incident, were banned from using the community pool for excessive splashing. Mark Peterson, however, got the worst of it. The day after the meeting, he found an official HOA notice taped to his front door. It read, "Notice of Noncompliance. Unauthorized media attention and defamation of HOA leadership. HOA fines, $1,500. Failure to comply may result in a lien against your property." Mark stared at the paper, his hands shaking. Janice was trying to fine him for speaking out. She wasn't just fighting back, she was waging war. The tension in Maplewood Hills reached a boiling point. Neighbors began fighting back in small ways. Some ignored her ridiculous fines. Others refused to acknowledge her authority altogether. Some even deliberately violated HOA rules just to spite her. Automobile parking on the street for longer than 2 hours? Done. Deer lawn gnomes and pink flamingos sprouting up everywhere? Absolutely. Party poppers, someone threw an HOA Janice Sucks block party? Oh, you better believe it happened. Janice, furious and humiliated, called an emergency HOA board meeting. The few remaining board members, who had once been her loyal lapdogs, now looked visibly uncomfortable. They were realizing that Janice had become a liability. But Janice refused to back down. "I don't care what these people think," she hissed. "The rules are the rules, and if I have to find every single one of them to restore order, I will." Her last-ditch effort to regain control? She hired private security to patrol the neighborhood, armed with notebooks to document violations and body cameras to record unruly behavior. The first day the security firm arrived, they immediately ticketed a 10-year-old for riding his bike on the sidewalk. That was the final straw. The residents of Maplewood Hills had had enough. Fueled by anger, frustration, and sheer pettiness, they launched an all-out rebellion. Someone created an anonymous Twitter account at HOA Nice Files, exposing every ridiculous fine, every absurd rule, and every shady action Janice had ever taken. Within hours, the account went viral. Imagine living in a neighborhood where the HOA bans ambulances. This is not a joke. Firebreaking. Local HOA President Janice Miller hires security to stop kids from riding bikes. Is this real life? Fire HOA Janice faces potential lawsuit after ambulance blocking incident. Stay tuned. Soon, the local news caught wind of the story. Reporters showed up in the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking questions. They wanted interviews, footage, first-hand accounts of Janice's reign of terror. And then, the biggest bombshell of all dropped. Someone, a mysterious whistleblower, had sent an anonymous letter to the mayor's office. Inside was undeniable proof that Janice had been embezzling HOA funds for years. Thousands of dollars had disappeared from the HOA budget. The city immediately launched an official investigation, and just like that, Janice's iron grip on Maplewood Hills began to crumble. Meanwhile, Janice was still blissfully unaware of the disaster heading her way. As news vans circled the neighborhood, she strutted through the cul-de-sac with her usual air of self-importance, completely confident in her untouchable status. She had no idea that at that very moment, in a government office downtown, the mayor was reviewing a stack of damning evidence against her. She had no idea that the city's legal team was already drafting an emergency motion to strip her of her HOA position. And she had no idea that her own former best friend, a disgruntled ex-HOA treasurer, had just agreed to testify against her in court. The walls were closing in fast. But Janice, she still thought she was winning. And that was the funniest part of all. With tensions at their peak and the mayor preparing to make his move, Janice's downfall was no longer a question of if, but when. And trust me, when it happened, it was spectacular. The mayor of Maplewood Hills, David Chun, was not a man to be trifled with. He had built his reputation on being tough on corruption, and when the anonymous letter exposing Janice's financial crimes landed on his desk, he didn't hesitate. He flipped through the stack of evidence. Bank transfers, falsified HOA budgets, even emails where Janice openly joked about milking the HOA dry. His expression darkened. "This," he muttered, "is exactly the kind of nonsense I hate dealing with." His assistant, Anna, raised an eyebrow. "So what do we do?" The mayor leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk. Then, with a smirk, he said, "We burn her to the ground. Legally, of course." Back in the neighborhood, Janice was completely oblivious to the storm heading her way. She was still parading around like a victorious queen, oblivious to the fact that half the town wanted her head on a stick. Since the security guards she hired were basically useless, Janice had taken it upon herself to personally patrol the neighborhood, armed with a clipboard and a self-righteous sense of power. She strutted down the street, hunting for new victims. That's when she spotted Mr. Harrison, an elderly resident who had lived in Maplewood Hills since before the HOA even existed. His crime? His mailbox was the wrong shade of beige. Janice marched up to his porch and rang the doorbell, tapping her foot impatiently. When the old man finally answered, Janice flashed her most condescending smile. "Mr. Harrison," she cooed, "I'm afraid you're in violation of HOA Code 14B. Your mailbox isn't within the approved neutral color palette." Mr. Harrison rubbed his temples. "Janice, it's been this color for 15 years. Janice's smile didn't falter. "Then I suppose it's been in violation for 15 years. She handed him a violation notice. "You have 72 hours to repaint it or face a $500 fine." Mr. Harrison sighed. "Janice, do you ever get tired of being awful?" Janice just grinned. "I thrive on it." Meanwhile, the mayor was setting his plan into motion. First, he arranged a public audit of the HOA's finances. This wasn't just any audit. It was a highly publicized event, with reporters tipped off about potential financial discrepancies in Maplewood Hills. The audit was Janice's worst nightmare. Within hours of the announcement, Janice's phone was blowing up with panic calls from her remaining allies. Speech balloon HOA board member 1, "Janice, the city is digging into the finances. What do we do?" Speech balloon HOA board member 2, "The mayor is personally involved. This is serious." Speech balloon Janice, "Calm down. I have it under control." Did she? Absolutely not. Janice raced home, locked the door, and immediately started deleting every incriminating email, shredding documents, and wiping her laptop. Unfortunately for her, the forensic accountants sent by the mayor were very, very good at their jobs. Within 24 hours, they uncovered a treasure trove of corruption. Open file folder $120,000 in miscellaneous HOA expenses that had mysteriously disappeared. Open file folder fake invoices for community repairs that never actually happened. Open file folder an HOA maintenance fund that had been used for Janice's personal home renovations. The evidence was devastating. And then, the final bombshell dropped. One of Janice's former best friends, ex-HOA treasurer Diane Evans, flipped. Diane walked into the mayor's office with a flash drive full of emails proving that Janice had knowingly and intentionally stolen from the HOA. "She made us fake expense reports," Diane admitted, looking ashamed. "She said if we kept quiet, we'd all get a little something extra at the end of the year." The mayor leaned forward. And what made you come forward now? Diane took a deep breath. She blocked a freaking ambulance, sir. Enough is enough. While Janice was frantically trying to cover her tracks, the mayor went for the kill shot. He issued an emergency order suspending the HOA board and froze their assets pending an investigation. That meant Janice's beloved HOA credit card? Useless. Her ability to fine people for nonsense violations? Gone. She was still smugly sipping her overpriced latte in her backyard when her phone rang. Hello? This is Janice. Janice Miller. A deep voice replied, Yes. Who is this? This is Mayor David Chun. Janice nearly choked on her latte. The mayor wasted no time. As of today, your HOA authority has been suspended. A full audit has revealed evidence of embezzlement and fraudulent activity. Expect legal action. You may want to hire a lawyer. Janice froze. This is outrageous, she sputtered. I am an elected official of this community. The mayor chuckled. Janice, you weren't elected. You ran unopposed because no one else wanted to waste their time with HOA politics. Janice's face turned red. This is a witch hunt. No, the mayor said smoothly. This is justice. Then he hung up. Janice's entire world started crumbling. The HOA board turned against her, realizing she was toxic and untouchable. Her neighbors celebrated her downfall, blasting music and throwing a massive Janice going down barbecue. Even her security firm bailed on her, refusing to work for a now-defunct HOA. But Janice, she wasn't going to let it end like this. Her final, desperate move? She hired an expensive, cutthroat lawyer and announced she was suing the city for defamation and abuse of power. Yes, you heard that right. Janice, who had literally stolen from her own community, was now claiming to be the victim. But she had no idea that the legal battle ahead would be the one that finally destroyed her for good. Because what happened in Cordo, it was spectacular. The town of Maplewood Hills had never seen anything like it. The HOA president who had ruled with an iron fist was finally being dragged into court, and everyone wanted front-row seats to the show. As the trial date approached, Janice was still in complete denial. This is nothing but a witch hunt, she hissed to her lawyer, Simon Croft, a smug, high-priced attorney who specialized in getting corrupt executives out of trouble. Simon adjusted his tie. Janice, they have overwhelming evidence against you. Janice scoffed. Evidence can be spun. We argue that everything was a misunderstanding. I was simply following HOA protocols. Simon sighed, already regretting taking her case. Meanwhile, the town was buzzing with excitement. Local businesses put up signs reading Justice for Maplewood Hills, and ding dong, Janice is gone. One of the neighbors even made t-shirts with Janice's scowling face and the words rules are rules, her infamous excuse for blocking the ambulance. But the biggest moment came the morning of the trial. The courtroom was packed with reporters, residents, and even a few former HOA board members who had secretly despised Janice. Janice, dressed in an offensively bright pink suit, walked into the courtroom like she owned the place. She shot smug smiles at the reporters, acting as if she were the wrongfully accused victim. Then the evidence started rolling in. First, the financial records, exposing Janice's $120,000 embezzlement scheme. Then the forensic accounting team testified, revealing that Janice had doctored financial statements and written fake invoices for services that never happened. The mayor sat in the audience, arms crossed, watching the train wreck unfold. Then came the nail in the coffin. Janice's former best friend and ex-HOA treasurer, Diane Evans, took the stand. Diane looked right at Janice and took a deep breath. She made us fake invoices, Diane said. She threatened us. She told us that if we ever went against her, she'd bury us in HOA fines and legal trouble. Janice's smug expression crumbled. Diane continued, she stole from us. She used our HOA funds to renovate her backyard, buy luxury furniture, and fund vacations. And when I told her I was going to report her, Diane paused, her voice catching. She threatened my family. The courtroom gasped. Janice shot up from her seat. That's a lie, she shrieked. I never. Sit down, Ms. Miller. The judge's voice was cold and sharp. Janice slammed back into her chair, seething. But the next piece of evidence, it was the final nail in her coffin. The prosecution played a video recording from the ambulance company's dashcam. The footage showed Janice physically standing in the road, blocking the emergency vehicle, arguing about parking violations while Mark Peterson's wife was literally dying inside. The courtroom fell silent. The judge rubbed his temples. Ms. Miller, do you have any idea how reckless and cruel this was? Janice crossed her arms and glared. Rules are rules. The entire courtroom erupted. The judge slammed his gavel down. That will be enough. I've seen all I need to see. The verdict? Janice's world crumbled. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. Skull guilty on all charges. Janice went pale. Then the judge delivered his ruling. Keycap 1 Janice was ordered to repay every cent she had stolen, $120,000 plus fines and interest. Keycap 2 she was permanently banned from ever serving on an HOA board again. Keycap 3 the HOA was officially dissolved. Keycap 4 she was sentenced to 18 months of probation, including 500 hours of community service. But the final blow? Janice was forced to make a public apology to the community on camera. It was the most humiliating moment of her life. Janice stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by news crews, gripping the microphone with white-knuckled rage. "I regret any misunderstandings that may have occurred," she said through gritted teeth. Booing erupted from the crowd. "Say you're sorry," someone yelled. Janice looked like she was going to explode. "I apologize," she muttered, looking at the ground. But before she could say anything else, someone from the crowd shouted, "Hey Janice, rules are rules." The entire crowd erupted into laughter. Janice stormed off, her face burning red with humiliation. Sweet, sweet justice. With Janice officially ruined, the neighborhood celebrated. They held a massive block party, complete with a piñata shaped like Janice, which the kids gleefully smashed. Mark Peterson was hailed as a hero for standing up to Janice. He was given free dinners from local restaurants, and the mayor personally thanked him for his courage. The community threw a barbecue in honor of Sarah Peterson, who had thankfully recovered from her medical emergency. Meanwhile, Janice's life continued to crumble. Her house was put up for sale. She couldn't afford the legal fees. She applied for jobs, but no one wanted to hire a disgraced HOA tyrant. Her new neighborhood immediately knew who she was, thanks to the viral news coverage. And then, the ultimate karma moment. After moving into a new neighborhood, Janice received her first HOA violation notice. She opened the letter with shaking hands. Notice of noncompliance. Unauthorized lawn decorations. Fine, $250. Janice screamed in frustration. She had become the very thing she hated, a powerless homeowner under the rule of an HOA. And this time, she couldn't do a thing about it. The end. But not really. The story of HOA Janice became legendary. Her infamous "Rules Are Rules" video gained millions of views on social media. And Maplewood Hills? It flourished without her. No more ridiculous fines. No more power-hungry leadership. Just a happy, thriving community finally free from Janice's reign of terror. And as for Janice? Well, she was probably somewhere, sitting in her new neighborhood, glaring out the window and writing up a list of rules. Because some people never learn. The sun shone brighter in Maplewood Hills the day Janice was officially dethroned. Gone were the paranoid HOA security patrols, the nonsense fines, the endless rule updates, and Janice's clipboard of doom. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt like a community again. And to celebrate, the biggest block party in the history of Maplewood Hills. It started as a simple barbecue, but as word spread that the HOA was officially dead, it morphed into a full-on festival. Balloons everywhere. Musical notes, a DJ blasting, another one bites the dust. Hamburger grills fired up, burgers and hot dogs handed out like candy. Collision, a Janice piñata stuffed with fake HOA violation notices for the kids to destroy. At one point, Mark Peterson, the man whose tragedy had set all of this into motion, took the mic. "I just want to say thank you," Mark said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Thank you to everyone who stood up, who fought back, and who made sure that people like Janice never have power over us again." The crowd cheered wildly, and just when they thought the night couldn't get any better, fireworks exploded over Maplewood Hills. Freedom had never tasted so sweet. Meanwhile, in Janice's new reality while the neighborhood celebrated, Janice was dealing with a nightmare of her own. First, her house had been put up for sale, but thanks to the negative publicity, nobody wanted to buy a home that had once belonged to the most hated HOA president in America. Her lawyer had already bled her dry. Her reputation was radioactive. And to top it all off, she had to move into a new neighborhood under a different HOA. The first day in her new home, she stepped outside to inspect her front yard. And that's when she noticed it. A violation notice stuck to her mailbox. Notice of noncompliance. Unauthorized garden decorations. HOA fine, $250. Janice's blood boiled. Absolutely not, she growled, marching straight to the new HOA office to fix the issue. Inside, she found a friendly, smiling HOA president named Brenda. Hi, I'm Janice Miller, and I need to discuss this nonsense violation I just received. Brenda tilted her head. Oh, we don't consider violations nonsense, Ms. Miller. We take rules very seriously here. Janice's eye twitched. Brenda continued, oblivious to Janice's rising frustration. Your garden gnome exceeds our height restriction. Rules are rules. Janice lost it. I was an HOA president. I know how this works. There's always room for negotiation. Brenda laughed softly. Oh no, our HOA doesn't negotiate. It's important that everyone follows the rules. Otherwise, what's the point of having an HOA? Janice stood there, stunned. This was her own line, the one she had used countless times to shut down people who had tried to fight her stupid rules. And now, she was on the receiving end. She had become the very thing she had tormented for years, a powerless homeowner under an iron-fisted HOA. The internet made sure she never lived it down. As if Janice's new reality wasn't bad enough, the internet refused to let her fade into obscurity. The video of her blocking the ambulance had now been seen by millions. Her courtroom meltdown? Clipped, edited, and turned into hilarious TikToks. Fire rules are rules. HOA Janice learns the hard way. Fire Karen blocked an ambulance and got KTFO by karma. Fire the face of defeat, featuring Janice Miller. People all over the country roasted her. Even the local news kept bringing her up every time they covered HOA corruption. She couldn't even go to the grocery store without someone recognizing her and whispering, "Oh my God, that's her." At one point, a teenager at Starbucks recognized her and said, "Hey, you're that HOA lady who got wrecked, right?" Janice froze. The teenager grinned. Rules are rules. Janice stormed out. Meanwhile, Maplewood Hills thrived. With the HOA permanently dissolved, the community flourished. House with garden, no more ridiculous fines. Ambulance emergency vehicles could actually enter the neighborhood without a power trip stopping them. Artist palette people repainted their houses whatever colors they wanted. Bright blues, reds, even neon green. And in the ultimate act of spiteful rebellion, Mark Peterson and a few other neighbors installed a massive, 12-foot-tall garden gnome in the middle of the cul-de-sac. They named him Justice. Every day, people walked past Justice and smiled, knowing that Maplewood Hills had won. Janice's final desperate move? With her reputation in shambles, Janice tried one last, pathetic attempt at redemption. She started a YouTube channel. She called it The Real HOA Truth, hoping to expose the corruption that had ruined her life. Her first video was a 20-minute rant about how rules matter and how she was unfairly attacked by an out-of-control mob. It got absolutely ratioed. Thumbs down 7,000 dislikes. Speech balloon 10,000 hate comments. Rolling on the floor laughing hundreds of people commenting rules are rules just to troll her. Her second video? Even worse. By the time her third video flopped, Janice gave up. Her channel sat abandoned, a hilarious reminder of her failed attempt to rewrite history. The final, ultimate karma moment. Months later, Janice tried to run for a position on her new HOA board. She put up flyers, knocked on doors, and tried to convince people she was a great leader. But on the day of the election, she got exactly one vote, her own. She was laughed out of the meeting, humiliated, defeated, permanently powerless. The moral of the story? Power-hungry HOAs don't last forever. Eventually, people fight back. Eventually, karma catches up. And when it does, it's glorious. Final thoughts. Janice thought she was untouchable. She thought she could rule the neighborhood forever. But in the end, she lost everything. And Maplewood Hills? It thrived without her. Maplewood Hills was finally free. Without Janice's iron grip squeezing the life out of the community, things flourished in ways no one had expected. First, there was the immediate sense of relief, that feeling of stepping outside without having to worry about a random HOA violation waiting on your doorstep. Neighbors talked to each other again, forming real friendships instead of keeping their heads down to avoid being targeted. Street parties replaced neighborhood-wide fear. People actually enjoyed living there. And the best part? Nobody missed the HOA. The changes that transformed Maplewood Hills after Janice's reign ended. The residents banded together and decided to take control of their own community without the need for an oppressive HOA. House with Garden residents formed a voluntary neighborhood committee, one with zero power to find people and zero Janice-like tendency. Instead of policing people's gardens and parking spaces, They organized events, looked after elderly neighbors, and actually made life better. Ambulance emergency vehicles were now free to enter the community, thanks to a new city ordinance passed by the mayor. This law made it illegal for HOAs to interfere with emergency responders. Janice's ambulance blocking fiasco actually led to a major legal change. Artist palette people got creative with their homes. No longer trapped by Janice's ridiculous rules, residents painted their houses fun colors, added gardens, and installed whatever lawn decorations they wanted. The once perfectly beige neighborhood became a vibrant, beautiful place. Dogs finally got to be dogs. Janice had enforced insanely strict leash laws, including banning certain breeds. Now, a brand new dog park was built, giving the community pups their own place to run and play. Everywhere you looked, life was better, and it all started with people standing up to Janice. What happened to Janice? Oh, don't worry. Karma continued to wreck her life. Prohibited, she applied for jobs, but nobody would hire her. No company wanted to be associated with the infamous HOA tyrant who blocked an ambulance. Prohibited, she tried moving again, but her name was now well known in HOA circles. No one wanted her anywhere near a position of power. Prohibited, she became a walking meme. Her face was plastered all over social media. Her infamous line, "Rules are rules," now a punchline in viral videos. And then, the final cherry on top. One day, Janice received a notice from her new HOA. It read, "Notice of violation, unapproved mailbox color. Fine, $300. Janice screamed so loudly the entire block heard her. She had become the very thing she once tormented. The internet never forgets. Janice's story became legendary. The video of her blocking the ambulance was shared worldwide, with millions of people watching in horror and amusement. Fire her courtroom meltdown, a gift people used in arguments. Fire her mugshot, printed on coffee mugs. Fire her HOA takedown, documented in multiple YouTube videos. She was forever known as the woman who destroyed herself with her own arrogance. And every time someone Googled her name, all they saw were memes, news articles, and endless discussions about her downfall. Janice had lost, and the world never let her forget it. The message that stuck with people: Janice's downfall wasn't just a funny story. It became a lesson in what happens when power goes unchecked. Her story was shared in HOA reform groups, used as a cautionary tale in town halls, and even brought up in legal discussions about HOA abuse. More and more communities began questioning their HOAs. People started standing up against ridiculous rules, and in some places, corrupt HOA presidents actually lost power because of the awareness her story created. Janice had tried to control everything, but in the end, her downfall led to more freedom for everyone. Final thoughts: standing up to HOA tyranny. This story proves one thing: bullies in power only stay in power if people let them. Janice controlled her neighborhood for years because people were too afraid to fight back. But once one person, Mark Peterson, took a stand, the entire community followed. And once they did, Janice's power crumbled overnight. If you're dealing with your own HOA nightmare, remember, house with garden, you're not alone. HOAs can be beaten. Door bullies only win if people stay silent. Loudspeaker public exposure is their worst enemy. And if your HOA thinks they can get away with nonsense, make sure the world hears about it. Because as Janice learned the hard way, once the internet gets involved, there's no coming back. Have you ever dealt with a nightmare HOA? Microphone, tell us your story in the comments. Thumbs up, smash that like button if you love seeing HOA tyrants get what they deserve. Bell, subscribe for more insane HOA takedowns, because trust me, we've got even crazier stories coming soon. And remember, rules are rules. Smiling face with horns.